Sub-Saharan Africa has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow Sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep Sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them.
Africa's riches have always been its greatest curse. From colonization to the modern era, global powers have kept the continent divided and dependent. South Africa is no exception. Let's uncover how foreign interests maintain their grip on Africa's potential. Welcome to Inkarhi Its Time. I'm Kondos, and today we tackle one of the most insidious challenges facing South Africa and the continent at large: the role of global powers in keeping us dependent and divided. From our gold mines to our policies, foreign powers like the US, multinational corporations, and global institutions have strategically positioned themselves to extract value while leaving the majority of Africans behind. How did this happen? And what can we do to reclaim our sovereignty? Let's break it down. South Africa is a land of immense wealth. Gold, platinum, diamonds are rare mineral power industries across the globe. These resources should be a blessing, but for many South Africans, they have become a curse. Let's look at gold and platinum. South Africa holds the world's largest deposits of gold and platinum. These metals are essential for everything from jewelry to electronics and catalytic converters. Yet, the communities near these mines see little benefit from this wealth.
Based on current circumstances, then we should look to Africa, which is where the preponderance of these minerals are. How can we help foster the public-private partnerships, bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals.
Rare minerals. In a tech-driven world, rare minerals like vanadium and chromium found abundantly in South Africa are critical. But guess who control their extraction and profits? Not the people of South Africa. Strategic importance. These resources make South Africa a global focus. But instead of economic empowerment, this has led to exploitation. Foreign powers and corporations see us not as partners, but as suppliers of raw materials to fuel their economies. Extraction without empowerment. The problem isn't just that the resources are exported, it's how they are extracted and who benefits. Multinational dominance. Take companies like Anglo-American and Glencore. They dominate mining operations, yet pay minimal taxes while extracting billions in profits. Local workers face poor wages and unsafe conditions, while surrounding communities deal with polluted air and water.
What we're seeing in local communities is many local communities are complaining about the lack of benefit of this industry for the local people, and also the employees are complaining about the lack of benefit for employees. So my argument is that we have to tear up this Mineral Resource Development Act. It's under review currently, and there's a few principles that we have to put into this new act as we review this charter in 2014. So this discussion is very timely. I think we made a wrong decision to make the only requirement black empowerment, because black empowerment is a policy that applies to all companies in South Africa. It shouldn't be anything specific to the mining industry. So I would argue that the mining industry must do more than black empowerment. Now, so what I'm trying to say is that the other thing is that the benchmark for black empowerment in the mining industry is much, much lower than the rest of the economy for reasons that I won't even explain. But the mining industry has achieved very little in terms of black empowerment. For example, if you look at employment equity, we've done an analysis of all sectors of the economy. It, in fact, is done by the Employment Equity Commission. And it shows that mining is consistently the worst performer in terms of employment equity. Most companies in South Africa, even the ones that are not transformed, managed to achieve a lot in terms of black representation in junior management. The mining industry can't even achieve that. I looked at the figures on ABET, Added Basic Education and Training. About half of the industry, of the people in the industry, they are functionally illiterate.
In the mining industry?
In the mining industry, yeah. They're below ABET level 4. But the industry, the last time we looked, they'd only trained about 6,000 people to the level of ABET level 4.
And how many people roughly are employed in the mining sector?
In the mining sector, it's about, I think it's about 400,000 people. About half of them don't, half of them are functionally illiterate. They haven't reached ABET level 4, and only 6,000 of them have been trained by the industry. That was when we did our research a few years ago. So those are the figures that when you see Marikana, you begin to understand why the people are, the majority of the workers in Marikana will never ever be in junior management. So that's just giving me. So the main thing, the mistake about the black empowerment policy that we made is to say it is enough to just give 25% to black people. And I argue that is not enough. And the reason I say it's not enough is that this is a publicly owned asset. It should benefit everyone. By definition, a black empowerment transaction, or whatever, however you say it, will benefit a few black people. So there has to be more that to take from this industry for the country as a whole. So I would argue, in terms of what we've learned of the last 10 years of this Mining Resource Development Act, as we tear it up, as we should, is that there's certain things that we should do. In that 25% black ownership portion, we should stipulate targets for employees and targets for communities. So what I would say is that 10% must be for employees, or a certain percentage, a fixed percent must be for employees, and a certain fixed percent must be for communities. That's number one. So it can't be just amongst the black business consortium. It must benefit the local communities as well. So the second thing I would say is that we have to have a state portion of that as well, in addition to the 25%. So I would argue that it should be about 25% as well, the state portion, what you take back on behalf of the people of South Africa. And that is what I'm arguing at the moment here.
Economic disparities. These corporations claim they are boosting South Africa's economy, but the reality is that their wealth rarely trickles down. Towns near mines are often hubs of poverty rather than prosperity. Environmental destruction. And let's talk about the cost to our environment. For every ounce of gold or carat of diamond, there's poisoned rivers, devastated ecosystems, and barren lands. Who pays for this? Certainly not the companies that caused it. US influence in South Africa. The role of diplomacy and aid. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most influential global players, the United States. While often viewed as a partner, its actions reveal a more self-serving agenda. Economic leverage. Through foreign aid and trade agreements, the US positions itself as a friend of South Africa. But let's be real, aid comes with strings attached. Policies are shaped to favor US interests, not South African development. Trade dependency. America's trade dominance means our economy remains tied to their terms. Whether it's a AGOA agreement or tariff negotiations, South Africa often bends to US demands to avoid economic fallout.
And finally, I have to ask you about President Biden's announcement that billions of dollars of US money is going to go to South Africa to stop them using coal.
Mobilizing $8 billion in public and private finance to help South Africa replace coal-fired power plants with renewable energy sources and develop cutting-edge energy solutions like clean hydrogen.
What's going to be the impact of that? Because South Africa's already had enormous issues with reliable energy sources.
It's so sad. I mean, I was in South Africa in 2017, and I was, pretty impressed by their grid, and they're using coal, and at least where I was seeing clean air. And you just think like this is a place that needs more energy, more productivity, more prosperity. And instead, we're doing this new thing where we in the US are paying billions of dollars to get other people to take a vow of poverty. But we're doing it to some of the poorest places in the world. It's so perverse. There's no way, if you want to lower emissions, there's no way to do it humanely except by discovering cost competitive alternatives and innovating in them, like nuclear. It doesn't do any good to make poor countries get even poorer. Like, what is that going to accomplish? Is that going to stop China from building new coal plants? Is it going to stop India from building new coal plants? It's just this senseless destruction because people aren't thinking through what's actually good for human life.
Well said, Alex. And I know plenty of South Africans are struggling with regular blackouts, and this is, I think, going to make things even worse for them.
Africa as a continent will be the new battlefield for all the players in the world, all the big players in the world, especially when you see that the Gulf and Asia wants to move towards a currency which is a pegged currency. The African leaders are very strong. The people are ready to fight whatever the military onslaught if comes upon. But I believe that it's going to be a new battlefield in terms of not just trade and investments, but because of its massive natural resources as well. Because if you are going to have a currency in the world which is going to be a pegged currency to commodities and real production, what it means that the mining industry could be highly regulated moving forward and even nationalized in some countries, which means that Africa, which is a big treasure in terms of mining resources, definitely the eyes of all the global powers will be on how to tap those resources. So Africa will be the new battlefield, and also some of the African nations who want to, come out of the colonial oppression which they have faced. And you rightly pointed out there's so many indirect French colonies, so to speak, with the direct and indirect influence of the French government. Similarly, there are colonies of US and UK as well, indirectly, in terms of, I mean, if I'm just to give you an example of how you make moves to make a country a colony kind of a thing. Assume there's a poor country which has a problem with the water resources. What do the so-called international community of nations, the West, which you talked about, US, UK, Europe, Canada, Australia, what do they do to help such a poor nation? They would sponsor supply of water bottles, right? That is what they would do, which means that next year again that poor nation would be requiring the same help, which means an onslaught of policy terms and conditions which is defined by the West in exchange of that water supply every year, right? Now we just compare that with what India would do. India would help them build dams, right? So that next year they do not have to come again for asking things. So you see, when this kind of nations, they are going to make huge amount of exploitation with these African countries, and African countries will have to take some stand when it comes to picking who their partners in development would be. So Russia, China, India, United States, that they have many options now where the world goes in terms of the African world moves. I mean, South Africa is definitely a part of BRICS, a major part of BRICS organization. So, and they are keen to move towards moving out of the US dollar hegemony. Even small countries, Zimbabwe, Ghana, moving towards gold and silver kind of commodities to trade their major transactions. So new things happening, and we are watching United States military with a lot of surprise as to how they move about these new changes which are coming next year.
John Steinhausen's letter to the US. A recent example is John Steinhausen's infamous letter to the US requesting election observers. On the surface, this might seem like a call for transparency. But let's think deeper. What does it mean for sovereignty when a foreign power is invited to oversee our democratic process? implication for sovereignty. This wasn't just about ensuring fair elections. It was about solidifying foreign influence in our political landscape. Every invitation like this erodes our ability to self-govern and makes us beholden to external powers. Corporate interests. US corporations also play a significant role in shaping South Africa's economic landscape, often to our detriment. Tech, mining, and finance. From Silicon Valley giants to mining conglomerates, US companies extract profits from South Africa while paying far less than their fair share in taxes. Their presence widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Wage inequality. Let's not forget the workers. US corporations perpetuate low wages and exploit South Africa's labor, keeping wealth concentrated at the top.
Let me put it this way, that 20% of the population is the rich elite. Then there are a 30% that's neither here nor there. They are what one can call a petite bourgeois. And then there is the 50% that is very much impoverished. Now that top 20%, 10 million people, received 75% of total income. 3.7 million of them are white and 6.3 million are black. But the whites are the richer part of that group. The lower 50% of the population received only 8% or less than 8% of total income. Now, it is a shocking situation. We had a political transformation. Apartheid has been abolished, but the political economic system that was put in its place is an ANC dominated political system and an economic system that have become internationalized, that became Americanized. So from the point of view of the lower 50%, nothing of worth have happened. Yes, I must say there is the social grants for elderly people and the social grants for children. That's the only positive thing that happened, but it is not good enough. The living conditions of that lower 50%, 25 million people, of which 24 million is Africans, are rather shocking.
The role of global institutions, the World Bank and IMF. Global institutions like the World Bank and IMF are often portrayed as helpers, but their policies have done more harm than good. When South Africa takes loans from these institutions, it comes with conditions: cut public spending, privatize key services, and open up markets for foreign competition. These measures might balance the books, but they devastate ordinary citizens. For example, the privatization of essential services like water and electricity. Who benefits? Not the people relying on affordable services, but private companies seeking profits.
Services and the pricing thereof, the costing is impacted by the loans that we're getting from the IMF and the World Bank in this current Cyril Ramaphosa-led government, because we're taking loans like no one's business.
Absolutely.
Right? And so what then happens that when you have to structure the costing and the pricing for, when you cost your services and you price it, the downtrodden people aren't able to, and the normal average South African is not able to afford that. You know, that's why the cost of services is going through the roof, because of these loans. Remember during President Zuma's tenure as president, President Zuma never took any loans. We owed nobody. We never took any more loans. And that's one of the things that also really ticked a lot of the West and the likes of the World Bank and the likes of the IMF. It ticked them off. And then all of a sudden there was all these rating agencies that wanted to rate us. Come on, we know why. It is just pure propaganda about the fact that they know that we didn't owe them, we're not indebted to them, and we're self-sufficient. That's under President Zuma's presidency.
The debt trap. Debt is one of the most effective tools to keep nations dependent. South Africa's debt to global institutions limits its ability to prioritize local needs. Every payment takes away from education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This isn't accidental. It's by design. A dependent Africa is a controllable Africa.
The IMF formulates its annual country report through interacting with public and private sector representatives, and it's painting a more positive picture for the South African economy, given a number of tailwinds the country's enjoyed, like no load shedding for much of the year and a lower inflation environment. But it's flagged the prospect of trade constraints through the possibility of higher tariffs next year, as well as an economic slowdown in key trading partners like China and the EU, as possible risks for the local economy.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to inflationary risk, cost push inflation is the most difficult type to manage, as opposed to demand pull inflation, which happens locally through the purchasing power or the demand, locally speaking. But when it comes to now tariffs, it is quite a big risk for any country.
The IMF has made a number of recommendations to help improve the economy's fortunes. These include the more aggressive pursuit of implementing structural reforms in terms of improving enabling sectors like energy and logistics and encouraging more private sector participation, as well as government continuing its approach to getting a better handle on public finances, among other issues.
As Sovereign Africa ratings, we do look at these issues just based on our methodology. So most of them are covered. And I do agree with a lot of the recommendations.
Divide and rule strategy. Exploiting political divisions. Divide and rule isn't just a colonial relic. It's a strategy still used by global powers to maintain control over African nations. Foreign powers support competing political factions to weaken governance. The more divided we are, the easier we are to manipulate. Undermining African unity. Attempts at African unity are consistently undermined by these same powers. Why? Because United Africa is a threat to global dominance. Organizations like the African Union or SADC have immense potential but are often weakened by external interference. Whether through bribery, coercion, or sabotage, foreign powers ensure Africa remains fragmented. The fight for true liberation starts with understanding. The systems keeping us dependent are not invisible, but they require us to wake up and resist. Educate ourselves about these dynamics. Demand policies that protect African interests. And most importantly, support leaders who stand for the people, not foreign powers. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to African sovereignty? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Inkarhi Its Time. Together, we can reclaim Africa's destiny. In our next episode, we examine political accountability. Are our leaders genuinely working for us, or are they complicit in these global systems? Let's explore what it takes to ensure leaders remain answerable to the people. Don't miss it. Thank you for watching and take care.